The air in the ballroom thickened, a sticky residue of cheap champagne and forced smiles. My father, Arthur, stood bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the banquet hall lights, a man finally shedding the shackles of 40 years in corporate accounting. He called me a disgrace. The words hung, heavy and putrid, in the space between us, a testament to a lifetime of unspoken resentments and carefully constructed facades. This wasn't a celebration, it was an execution. My dad's retirement party was supposed to be a triumph. He'd worked at Sterling and Finch his entire adult life, a cog in the machine, and now he was finally free. Or so he claimed. The reality felt more like a public declaration of war. He clutched a microphone, its cord snaking across the patterned carpet. His face, usually a mask of mild disapproval, was flushed crimson, a vein thrumming at his temple. "I want to thank everyone for coming," he began, his voice booming, unnaturally loud in the hushed room. A smattering of polite applause followed. 40 years. 40 years of spreadsheets, of quarterly reports, of making sure everything balanced. He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. His eyes, usually cold and distant, landed on me, and a flicker of something ugly sparked within them. And in all that time, I taught my son one thing: responsibility. Diligence. Hard work. He took a slow, deliberate sip from the glass of lukewarm, sparkling wine a server had placed in his hand. My mother, Eleanor, stood beside him, her smile frozen, her fingers digging into his arm. She wore the pearl necklace he'd given her on their 30th anniversary, a subtle symbol of their long, complicated history. My sister, Sarah, perched on the edge of her seat at the head table, her phone clutched tight, her gaze darting between Dad and me. Her husband, Mark, a man whose primary function seemed to be nodding agreeably, patted her arm. "Some people," my father continued, his voice dropping an octave, "understand what it means to build something, to contribute, to be a pillar of the community." His gaze remained fixed on me, a venomous arrow. "And then there are others." He gestured vaguely in my direction with his free hand, the one not holding the microphone. "Others who choose a different path." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck, the collective weight of 100 curious stares. My cousin Leo, a burly man who always smelled faintly of sawdust, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes wide. Aunt Carol, a woman whose life revolved around community gossip, leaned forward, her ear practically twitching. "My son, Damian," Dad announced, his voice dripping with mock solemnity, "has decided that a career in performance art is a viable life choice." He snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound that echoed through the otherwise silent room. "A performance artist. He paints, he sculpts, he makes installations." He made air quotes around the last word, his mouth twisting in disgust. "Meanwhile, his sister, Sarah, a successful architect, has provided me with 2 beautiful grandchildren and a stable, respectable life. She understands what it means to make a parent proud." He turned, beaming at Sarah, who offered a weak, embarrassed smile. She avoided my gaze. My stomach clenched. I felt the familiar burn, a low, simmering heat that always preceded an eruption. This wasn't new. The disdain, the disappointment, it had been a constant companion since I'd declared my intention to study fine arts instead of business. But to air it out here, now, in front of all these people, his colleagues, our family friends, the entire world he inhabited, it was a new low. "I've spent my life ensuring my family had security," Dad went on, his voice rising in pitch. "I've worked tirelessly. And what do I get in return? A son who lives hand-to-mouth, chasing some ephemeral dream. A son who can't even hold down a proper job." He shook his head slowly, a performance of profound sorrow. "Frankly, Damian, you're a disgrace. A waste of potential. I look at you, and I see everything I tried to prevent." A collective gasp swept through the room. My mother let out a tiny, choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Sarah looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Mark's agreeable nod had vanished, replaced by a look of horrified disbelief. Leo stared at his plate, his face a mask of discomfort. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the distant clinking of silverware from the kitchen. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My hands, usually steady, trembled. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, a hot flush of shame and fury. For years, I'd swallowed his barbs, his passive-aggressive comments, his blatant dismissals of my work. I'd always tried to be the bigger person, to understand his perspective, to believe that deep down, he just wanted what he thought was best for me. But disgrace? Waste of potential? Not tonight. Not in front of everyone. I pushed my chair back, the screech of metal against the polished floor echoing through the shocked room. Every head snapped towards me. My father, still holding the microphone, blinked, momentarily caught off guard. His face, however, quickly hardened. "Oh, is the artist going to make a scene?" he sneered, his voice laced with contempt. "More drama, just what we need." I stood, my legs feeling strangely heavy, yet firm. My voice, when it came, was surprisingly steady, though it vibrated with a raw, controlled anger. "No, Dad. No scene. Just the truth." I walked slowly towards the head table, towards him. Each step felt like an act of defiance. The air crackled with tension. My mother's eyes were wide, pleading. Sarah had buried her face in her hands. I stopped a few feet from him, looking him squarely in the eye. He was taller than me, but in that moment, I felt like I towered over him. "You want to talk about disgrace?" I asked, my voice low, but carrying across the silent room. "You want to talk about wasted potential?" He puffed out his chest, regaining his bluster. "I've earned the right to speak my mind, Damian. I'm your father. And I'm your son," I countered, the words sharp, precise. "And for 40 years, you've been a prisoner in that office. You hated every single day of it. You came home, night after night, with that same dead look in your eyes. You complained about your boss, about your colleagues, about the meaningless numbers you pushed around." My voice gained strength, a current of long-suppressed frustration breaking through. "You hated it, Dad. You hated it, and you let it consume you." His face went from crimson to a sickly pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "Remember when I was 10? I continued, ignoring his stunned silence. "I built that elaborate fort in the backyard, remember? With the secret passages and the flag? You came out one afternoon, saw it, and you smiled. A real smile, not the tight-lipped one you wore to work. You said, 'Damian, you have such an imagination. You could be an engineer, build bridges.'" I paused, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "An engineer. Because building was only valuable if it served a practical, corporate purpose, right?" My mother let out a soft sob. Sarah lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed, but she was listening, truly listening, for the first time in years. "You called me a disgrace for pursuing something I love," I stated, my gaze unwavering. "You called me a waste of potential for choosing joy over a paycheck you despised." I took a step closer, my voice dropping to a near whisper, yet it resonated with an undeniable power. "Do you know what true disgrace is, Dad? It's waking up every morning, knowing you're about to spend another 8 hours doing something that drains your soul. It's living a life filled with regret, with what-ifs, because you were too afraid to chase anything beyond the safe, predictable path." His hand, still clutching the microphone, began to shake. "You said I couldn't hold down a proper job," I pressed on. "I've held down 3 jobs, Dad. All at once sometimes. To pay for my materials, to pay my rent, to keep pursuing this ephemeral dream. I've cleaned toilets, I've waited tables, I've driven delivery trucks. Also, I could afford to paint, to sculpt, to create. Because unlike you, I refuse to let my passion die a slow, agonizing death in the name of responsibility and respectability." A low hum of agreement rippled through the room. Some of his colleagues, men and women who had spent decades alongside him, nodded slowly. They knew. They understood the quiet desperation he had brought into the office every day. "You're retiring now," I said, my voice softening slightly, though the edge of steel remained. "You're finally free. But what are you free to do, Dad? What hobbies did you cultivate? What passions did you nurture outside of the office politics and the stock market reports? You sacrificed everything for a life you hated, and now you have nothing left but a golf membership and a profound sense of emptiness." He looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years. The mask of anger and contempt had fallen away, revealing a raw, vulnerable hurt. His eyes, usually so guarded, now held a flicker of something akin to fear. "I'm not a disgrace, Dad," I declared, my voice ringing with conviction. "I'm living a life that is vibrant, challenging, and yes, sometimes financially precarious. But it is mine. I wake up excited about what I'll create. I go to bed exhausted but fulfilled. I'm not rich, but I'm rich in purpose. And that, Father, is something you never allowed yourself to be." I held his gaze for a long moment, letting the weight of my words sink in. The microphone slipped from his grasp, clattering against the polished floor with a sharp, metallic clang that startled everyone. My mother rushed forward, her hands reaching for him. Sarah was on her feet, her face a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. "You think I don't know that?" my father choked out, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper. He looked away, his eyes scanning the faces of his former colleagues, then back to his wife, then finally to me. You think I don't know what I gave up? A single tear tracked a path down his cheek, a stark contrast to the angry, unfeeling man he had presented moments before. It was for you, he mumbled, his shoulders slumping. For all of you. No, Dad, I said, my voice gentler now but firm. It was for you. You convinced yourself it was for us, but it was your fear, your need for external validation, that kept you chained. We never asked you to sacrifice your soul for us. We just wanted you to be happy. My mother wrapped her arms around him, pulling him into a tight embrace. He buried his face in her shoulder, his body shaking with silent sobs. The room remained hushed, a collective witness to a lifetime of unspoken truths finally spilling out. Sarah walked over to me, her eyes still red, but a small, tentative smile played on her lips. She reached out, taking my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Damian, she whispered, I never knew you felt all that. You never asked, I replied, a small, wry smile touching my own lips. None of you did. I'm sorry, she said, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. For not seeing. For not saying anything. It's okay, Sarah, I assured her, squeezing her hand. It's not too late. Aunt Carol, always one for a dramatic flourish, cleared her throat loudly. Well, she declared, her voice cutting through the remaining tension. That was certainly a speech. Much more interesting than quarterly reports. A few nervous chuckles broke the silence. Leo, emboldened, clapped me on the shoulder, a wide grin on his face. Attaboy, Damian. Someone had to say it. My father slowly straightened up, pulling away from my mother. His face was blotchy, his eyes still glistening, but there was a flicker of something new in them. A dawning awareness, perhaps. He looked at the microphone, still lying on the floor, then at me. Damian, he started, his voice still rough. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Dad. I responded, my gaze steady. Just listen. And maybe, for once, just see. I turned to the assembled crowd, a sea of faces that had witnessed my public shaming and my subsequent rebellion. Thank you all for coming tonight, I said, my voice clear and strong. And thank you for bearing witness to a family discussion. It's been a long time coming. A few more chuckles, a few nods of understanding. It wasn't the retirement party anyone expected, but it was certainly memorable. As the guests slowly began to filter out, some offering me awkward pats on the back, others avoiding eye contact, I felt a strange sense of lightness. The weight of years of unspoken resentment, of trying to be the son he wanted instead of the man I was, had finally lifted. My father, still supported by my mother, watched me. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of pain, regret, and perhaps a sliver of grudging respect. Later, as the ballroom emptied, leaving only a few stragglers and the catering staff, my mother approached me. Her eyes were still red, but her smile was genuine. Damian, she whispered, pulling me into a tight hug. I'm so proud of you. So proud. Thanks, Mom, I murmured, returning her embrace. It was time. My father stood a few feet away, watching us. He cleared his throat. Damian, he said, his voice surprisingly soft. That sculpture, the one with the twisted metal, the figures reaching out, what was it called again? My breath hitched. He had actually remembered. It's called Unfettered Spirit, Dad, I told him, a small, genuine smile finally breaking through. He nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. Unfettered Spirit, he repeated, as if tasting the words. He looked at me, a long, searching gaze. Maybe you can tell me about it sometime. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an embrace. But it was a start. It was a crack in the impenetrable wall he had built around himself, a tiny opening for understanding, for connection. And in that moment, under the lingering scent of stale champagne and the quiet hum of the emptying hall, I knew that I had finally, truly unfettered my own spirit.